So, welcome back to another video. I wanted to take a little different approach on this video, and I want to talk about my first open source contribution, and then roll in the tips on how you can contribute to open source yourself. So, before I jump in, I want to mention that on my other channel, I actually have myself walking through an entire contribution to open source. I gave a contribution to the GitHub CLI project, and if you're interested in seeing how I went through open source today, feel free to go check that out on my other channel. So according to the Linux Foundation and Dice Jobs, 89% of hiring managers are finding it difficult to find someone with open source experience. Open source is at this point extremely valuable to your career. It is also extremely in demand when it comes to recruiting for hiring managers. 89% of hiring managers are actually looking for open source contributions and find it difficult to find someone with that background. The shift in our industry of actually hiring full-time engineers to do open source has completely changed in the last 5 years. You're probably wondering, how do I get into open source? And I know we have coming up this month, we actually have Hacktoberfest, which is the 1 month that everybody sort of just unleashes the doors, adds labels to their projects. I do recommend check out hacktoberfest.com. You could actually see all the different projects who are welcoming contributors for the month of October. But I would also say that October is not the only month to do contributions as well, which is why I want to actually talk about my first contribution. So back in 2015, I had this project that I was working on with some other people I met on the internet. Basically, it was to take a Slack community and build a tool to auto-invite people into that community. At the time, Slack was a manual process. Whenever you wanted to invite someone into your community, you had to manually send them an invite through an email, through the dashboard. And today, it's actually a lot easier. Someone can actually invite themselves. You just sort of fill out the email, and someone can accept your invite. But what I'm getting at is that we built a community. It was a free community. We had the free plan for Slack, and the goal was to invite folks to this community and have a bot automatically accept their invite. And this sounds trivial today, and it sounds trivial today for me. But at the time, I was a pretty junior engineer, and I had no idea how to accomplish this. So I went to a lot of research. I was the only person in this group that actually had technical experience. The Slack community was specifically for people of color who were in the tech field, but not necessarily just engineers. So while growing this community, I discovered it and was onboarded into being their technical help. I did a lot of searching, and I found that the easiest way to get this done was through WebSockets, specifically Socket.io, and use a node server to actually watch for invites and then accept those invites when they came in. So that was basically the gist of it, and I ended up trying to write it myself. The problem was I didn't actually know how to write Node.js code at that time. I knew a bit of jQuery, but knowing JavaScript, pure JavaScript, but also JavaScript on the server side was quite different at the time. Also, JavaScript was going through a lot of changes at that time as well. As far as adopting ES6, there was a lot of differences of opinions, which actually split the community into IOJS and Node.js. But that's neither here or there. But that was the time that I was actually trying to learn JavaScript. And I stumbled onto this project that actually had the problem solved for me completely, which was amazing. I found it on GitHub. And just from searching Slack and inviter bots, or I'm not even sure what I searched, but I searched something and found this project. And the project itself worked beautifully. It just didn't work perfectly for what I was trying to get it done. Also, getting it to run onto a node server that I can run indefinitely on my computer, because also I didn't know how to get Node.js hosted. What I'm getting at is I didn't know anything I was doing, and so I went into this project and I saw that there was a person who created the project, the main contributor. At the time, I think it was actually the only contributor, and I found out that he created this as sort of like a fun little side project that he sort of set up in GitHub and then walked away from. Going into the project, I actually clicked on his profile, and on the left-hand side of someone's profile, you could actually see below, but you could actually find someone's email right there. And I ended up just finding his email and emailing him directly. And I'll leave a screenshot of our conversation right here. And my goal was to basically to say, hey, I want to use your project. It is something that I think it's going to solve my problem, but I don't know how to get this to run and set this up. From what I see in the code, this will work perfectly, but could you just help me out? And at the time, I was unaware of using Stack Overflow as a place to ask these questions. I thought it was also too specific to ask on Stack Overflow or Reddit or somewhere else. So I ended up just going straight to the source. The one thing I didn't even realize too as well, and this is a failure in the way I was trained as a developer, I didn't even know about GitHub issues and using those as proper ways to ask questions. I don't recommend using GitHub issues as a way to ask questions. Definitely check out, they have GitHub discussions, which is a new feature that's rolling out pretty soon. Ask those questions in a different place than someone's email is what I'm getting at. But the fact that I still sent him a direct email based on his project on GitHub and did not use GitHub to communicate, he did not even bat an eye. He actually responded to me right away. And one thing I want to mention too as well, I had a deadline of getting this to work the following week, so I just had the weekend to figure this out. So I spent the entire weekend, pretty much every evening, I would just work on this problem and try to figure this out. And the cool thing is that he actually was responsive to me even at past midnight, which was amazing. What I found out later was he was actually traveling in Thailand. So this is a picture of him actually in Thailand responding to me and saying, hey, probably turn that off. But this was a picture of him responding to me in Thailand and saying, hey, I'm sorry I've been slow to respond. I've been attending a K-pop concert, which kind of blew me away that not only did he take time out of his weekend, he also took time out of his weekend while attending a concert to respond to me about a project that was more of a throwaway project. And after experiencing that, and that was my first contribution, I ended up making a fix into the documentation that made it a little more clear that there was how to run the Harmony flag for Node.js. That was my fix and how I could get it to work. If you aren't aware, ES6 ended up being called ES 2015, which was the year that Chrome adopted all these new features. But yeah, so that's basically what the block was. It was just some sort of nuance that I wasn't aware of because I wasn't ingrained in the JavaScript community or didn't read JavaScript blog posts. So I would have learned that really quickly if I was involved or paid attention to the community. But you better believe I started paying attention to things like that. But what I'm getting at is my first open source contribution came because I just reached out to the maintainer and asked them questions. And I'm gonna roll into a video I recorded for Hacktoberfest and DigitalOcean, and that includes some tips on how to contribute to projects. But the one thing I didn't mention is actually reaching out and talking to somebody, asking those questions. I think it's the same thing that we would do as an engineer on a team. You wouldn't sit in silence and just get stuck on how to solve a problem using a project. You would reach out to the senior engineer or reach out to your manager and ask for ways to get unblocked. Because the more time you spend blocked, the more time you spend not actually shipping features. So in the same vein with open source, if you are unaware of how the project works, if you're unaware of like why this project is missing features or why there's a bug, that's an opportunity for you to contribute to open source. So take those opportunities and follow through with them. I also want to mention that you could follow me on Twitter. I do have conversations with folks on Twitter. If you have any sort of stories or wins of open source, leave them in the comments of your first time ever contributing open source. I'd love to hear about those and hear the stories. And without further ado, I just want to talk about the contributing.md. Contributing.md is going to be the sort of gateway, the doorway into your project. This will be the place where maintainers and contributors alike will find relevant information, but also guide and lead them into how to contribute to the project. Now, most people consider the README as the doorway,